I've got 10 plus waiver wire ads that are going to help improve your fantasy football team as we head into week 10. If you need quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, if you need to stream quarterback, if you need to stream the defensive position, I've got you covered on today's waiver wire pickup video. So before we get into my top 10, I want to quickly mention some players that should already be rostered. If you need a quarterback, CJ Stroud should be rostered already. Went off 50-point game and 6-point passing touchdowns last week. He's looking great. His weapons are healthy. Dalton Kincaid, his top tight end, should be rostered. Jahan Dotson, back-to-back weeks. Curtis Samuel's injury, you should definitely have Dotson rostered. Komet with T-Bag is definitely someone that you want to start. And then Alexander Madison, in case he's out there in any leagues with Cam Akers going down, he'll step into a lot of work. Okay, the number one player that you should be picking up this week, and I anticipate he's probably rostered in a lot of leagues, but just in case he is available, he should absolutely be your number one priority. A player that we've talked about stashing weeks ago, a player that we have liked on this channel, that is Tank Dell, wide receiver for the Houston Texans, rostered in 55% of ESPN leagues and 51% of sleeper leagues. So in some of your leagues out there, he will be available. Now keep in mind, I'll have something for smaller and larger leagues in this video. But last week, or yesterday rather, 11 targets, caught 6 of them for 114 yards and 2 touchdowns. The good news as well is he had the most snaps of any wide receiver on his team. He ran the most routes and he had the most targets. He had 13 total opportunities. They were feeding him the ball. This is the guy that they fell in love with. CJ told him, go draft this kid, and now you can see the chemistry that CJ and Tank Dell have. 3rd round pick, he's living up to the hype, and he's only going to be better and better as the year goes on. You know, not going to score 29 points every week, but he'll be a consistent flex for your 12-man league. So definitely go add Tank Dell, uber talented route runner that is getting opportunities. All right, the number 2 pickup. Now, if Stroud is already rostered and this guy is somehow available, he could absolutely be the answer for anyone who needs a quarterback. That is Kyler Murray. He's rostered in just 36% of ESPN leagues. There's no way. There is absolutely no way. Kyler Murray should be rostered in 80, 90, 100% of platforms everywhere. Keep in mind, guys, Kyler Murray has never scored outside of the top 12 on a per-game basis in his 4-year career in fantasy football. You can see in his rookie year, he was a quarterback 12. From his rookie year onwards, he did not have a lower points per game finish than the quarterback 8, and including 2 finishes as a quarterback 4. In his career, he's averaging 21 points per game. If we look at the quarterbacks this year in 2023, where he would rank amongst those guys before week 9, he would be 4th on a per game basis. In his career, he's averaging right now, compared to what Mahomes is doing this year, more than Mahomes, more than Lamar, more than Tua, again, this year. So this is a guy that should be considered a top 8 option when he returns. That means even in 8-man leagues, this guy should be rostered 100% across the board, in my opinion. We saw what Josh Dobbs was able to do. You got, obviously, Trey McBride breaking out there. You got Hollywood Brown. You got Michael Wilson. He's going to come back and be a great fantasy option. The number 3 pickup for me, this is Keaton Mitchell, running back out of Baltimore. Now, here's what I'll say. I think a lot of people will probably have Keaton as their number 1 pickup. However, I just don't believe that this is someone that you can now start. I don't think this is an A-Chan situation where it's like, wow, look at that guy. You can start him every week now. You know, it's not a Kyron situation, a Kyron Williams, where you're like, yep, that guy's going straight into my lineup. Keaton Mitchell last week, 9 rushing attempts, 1 target. 10 attempts, or 10 total touches, in a game where they absolutely dominated the competition in Seattle. It was in Baltimore, but the competition was Seattle, if you get what I'm trying to say here. So in a game that was an absolute blowout, it took that for us to finally see Keaton Mitchell. Now, he's probably gained some stock with his own coaching staff, with his performance, but this is not a situation where now Keaton Mitchell is just going to take over that backfield. He had 14 snaps yesterday, 3 routes run, 1 target, and 9 carries. If that game was competitive, I don't know that we see Keaton Mitchell more than 1 or 2 snaps. So as of right now, if you're going to go and absolutely blow all your fab on this guy, I don't think that's the right decision. However, I think he's a fine add for what he could be. Because if he continually performs the way he did last week, then he will grow a larger and larger role. Eventually, he could make Justice Hill irrelevant. He could take away touches from Gus Edwards. If he's that efficient, if he's that explosive, we always loved his speed coming out of college. But if he can do that on a consistent basis, he will grow a role for himself. However, I think last week is probably the outlier rather than what we should expect. So keep in mind, this is not a player that I would blow all my fab on. I'm not dumping 100% fab. I'm not dumping 50% of fab. I might dump 10 to 15% of my fab just to hold him if I need running back and I'm desperate to see what he can become. But all the teams out there who are good at running back, I think this is one of those guys that you just let sit on the waiver and someone else pick them up and spend their fab. But he is widely available, only rostered in 1% of ESPN leagues and 3% of sleeper leagues. So I would still consider him a stash, but now that he's shown flashes, that role could grow. But again, not a player that you want to start right away. That's just not the case in my opinion. Okay, the fourth name that you should be picking up, and transparency is great. Transparency is really important in these kind of videos. I'll be honest, guys, there's not a Puka Nacua here. There's not a Devon Achane. There's not a Kyron Williams. There's not a Sam Laporta. There's not a Dalton. There's no one of those league-winning assets outside of Kyler Murray, I would say, and maybe Tank Dell in today's video. But there are players who can absolutely help you. And if you're struggling at the tight end position, the fourth player could definitely help you. That is Taysom Hill. He's rostered in 39% of ESPN leagues, less in Yahoo, and 58% of sleeper leagues. So if you need a tight end, Taysom, I believe, should be one of your number one priorities. In the last 4 weeks, Taysom has been very, very good. And even with Juwan Johnson back, he is continuing to be very, very good. In the last 4 weeks, he's averaging 18.5 PPR points per game. And he's also seeing over 11 total touches per game. Total touches being carries and attempts. And that's not even accounting for the throwing attempts that he has. So on any given week, Taysom Hill could be the tight end one. If they're going to consistently use him like this, specifically in the red zone, he's got to become a must start until he proves us wrong. You can see last week he played 29 snaps, he ran 13 routes, he was targeted 5 times, and he carried the ball 11 times. Your tight end there is touching the ball 16 times, and we're not even accounting for the passing attempts that he had. So absolutely someone that you should pick up, and the upside is through the roof. We know that. All right, a player that I think you could see dropped in some leagues, but I would go ahead and suggest pick him up. That is Trey McBride, available in 43% of ESPN leagues, and he's rostered in 43% and 67% of sleeper leagues. 2 weeks ago, had the breakout game, 14 targets, a touchdown, over 25 PPR points. Last week, yesterday versus the Browns, only 3 receptions for 22 yards. But there's a lot of context there that's important. Number one, you went from Josh Dobbs to Clayton Tune, and you played the Cleveland Browns, maybe the best defense in the NFL. Clayton Tune did not look ready for the moment. He's clearly not a starting caliber quarterback, and the defense was all over them the entire day. Clayton was pretty poor, turnovers all day. So now you get Kyler Murray back this week. I am 90% confident Kyler Murray will play this week. He's been practicing. This has been their plan to ramp him up. And Kyler Murray likes to target his tight ends. We have seen that with Zach Ertz, and now Trey McBride is going to step into that role. So honestly, I would feel comfortable starting Trey McBride next week if you're streaming the position because Kyler Murray is going to play. But the good thing is he's still the number one tight end unquestionably in that offense. In fact, he's one of the top receiving offenses. Last week, he played 35 snaps, he ran 20 routes, and he had 5 targets, which was good for a team second amongst the entire team. So this is still a focal point of their offense. The number 6 player, I'm recording this right after Sunday Night Football, and we haven't seen Monday Night Football happen yet. So, I could look like an idiot for saying this, but if he's available on anyone's waivers, maybe go pick him up right now because he should not be. I talked about him on my stash video last week, and now Josh Palmer has been put on IR. That is Quentin Johnston. Quentin Johnston's available in 31% of ESPN. He is rostered. We just made that switch this week. He is rostered in 31% of leagues, meaning available in about 70% of ESPN leagues, and he's rostered in 42% of sleeper leagues. So this is a guy that should be available in a lot of leagues. Josh Palmer just went on IR. Last week versus Chicago, we finally saw the Chargers use him how we want them to use him, which is as a person over the middle. What can you do after the catch? You're not a deep ball, go up and get it, contested catch receiver. That's not who you are. You are great after the catch, and the Chargers are starting to use him that way. So maybe he has a great game versus the Jets, and if you pick him up before that game even happens, it could be a 200 IQ play. But either way, even if he goes up and has 8 targets, catches 5 of them for 50 yards, and he only has about 7 to 10 points, I'm still going to say go pick him up, especially with Palmer on IR for at least the next 4 weeks. All right, the number 7 pickup, if you miss out on Kyler Murray, this is a fantastic option and could be just as good. Joshua Dobbs, rostered in 17% of ESPN leagues and 20% of sleeper leagues, so available in 80% of leagues everywhere. Even if you are in a 1-quarterback league, Josh Dobbs is a legitimate option to be your starting quarterback on a weekly basis. With his rushing ability, he remains matchup proof. Last week with the Cardinals versus the Baltimore Ravens, we saw him put up a huge fantasy performance despite throwing multiple interceptions. This week versus the Atlanta Falcons, despite multiple turnovers, he also put up a huge week, and he didn't even start the game. Last week versus the Vikings, 7 carries, 66 yards, and a rushing touchdown. With Justin Jefferson eventually, with Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson, and his rushing ability, this guy becomes a streaming option every week, regardless of the matchup, to the point where if you're struggling at quarterback, he could be your answer. And the number 8 pickup, this is for anyone out there who is desperate at the running back spot and you just need someone to start potentially next week. That is Devin Singletary, rostered in 48% of ESPN leagues and 56% of sleeper leagues. Now, he got the bulk of the work last week with Dameon Pierce out with that injury. He saw 54 snaps, ran 27 routes, and touched the ball 15 total times. Now, he played a very good defense in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, so that didn't really turn into any fantasy points. However, if Dameon Pierce misses multiple weeks, he will be a starter for those people who are really, really struggling at the running back position. All right, now to end the video, I want to give you guys streaming options. If you need to stream quarterback, if you need to stream defense, this is the part of the video for you. Let's talk about quarterbacks first. My favorite streaming quarterbacks this week, Geno Smith versus the Washington Commanders. The Commanders give up the second most points to fantasy quarterbacks, and Geno Smith and that team needs to bounce back in a big way. He's got all the weapons, and he's going to face a very good secondary. Well, for him. It's good for him, if that makes sense. Number 2, Derek Carr at the Vikings. Derek Carr is putting up a really nice stretch here. He's been a consistent option, and now he gets the Vikings, who, as we can tell, should be able to put up points. They give up the 11th most points to fantasy quarterbacks. Derek Carr is a fine option. Number 3, Baker Mayfield versus the Tennessee Titans. Baker Mayfield is kind of this boom-bust player, but when he has a good matchup, he smashes. Now he gets to face the Titans. Guys, the Titans allowed Kenny Pickett to score a touchdown, and Kenny Pickett was barely missed a 2-touchdown game. Remember George Pickens didn't drag his foot? If Kenny Pickett can score almost 2 touchdowns versus this team, you know Baker Mayfield can do so as well. And number 4 is Russell Wilson at the Bills. This is not a good matchup against the Bills. The Bills are good against quarterbacks defensively. However, I'm more thinking about the fact that Russell Wilson is likely going to need to come from behind, which means that the game script would really suit him for fantasy purposes, constantly throwing a high amount of attempts, a high amount of yardage. All right, if you are needing to stream the defensive position, I'm going to give you 4 options here. Number 1, the Seahawks versus the Commanders. The Commanders are allowing, I believe, the 3rd most sacks per game right now. They're definitely top 3, if not number 1. I just looked that up recently, and I can't remember the exact number, but they're giving up a ton of sacks. Sam Howell is on track to be sacked an historic amount of times, like more than any quarterback ever. And the Seahawks, this is a great matchup for them as well overall, because the Commanders allow the 5th most points to opposing defenses in fantasy. Number 2, the Colts versus the Patriots. The Patriots are struggling to score on almost any defense. The Patriots give up the 2nd most points to opposing defenses in fantasy. the Colts are a great option. The Raiders versus the Jets, we know what, unfortunately, Zach Wilson can do when it comes to turning the ball over. Number 4, the Bucks versus the Titans. This is a great matchup for them as well. And to finish off the video, I'll give you a couple honorable mentions. If you're in a deeper format, you can pick up these guys: Demario Douglas, Jonnu Smith, Pat Fryermuth is coming back from the IR soon. He's a great guy to stash on your tight end position. Noah Brown, Cade Otton, Royce Freeman, and Brandon Powell. Brandon Powell is interesting because we don't know if KJ Osborne is going to miss time. If he does, then Brandon Powell in a deeper format could be a starting option for people. But that is it for today. Hopefully you appreciated the video. You enjoyed watching it, and hopefully it was helpful. Let me know what you think in the comments. Hit that like button. You guys know how to support the channel by now. You can support us over on the Flock Fantasy website. Use our promo code LAND. DM us with any questions over on Discord. We love you. Good luck, and go improve your team. Now that those idiots are done talking, who needs some rankings?
Hell yeah, I need some rankings.
Then use promo code LAND, L-A-N-D, for 30% off any membership at flockfantasy.com.
Oh.
It's so easy. Even your grandma could scan that QR code right there.